And hello, this is Eamonn O'Brien, and you're so welcome to the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And coming up today, we're going to talk about something that's really important for speakers and leaders who do business in Asian countries, or indeed would like to do so. So today we're going to talk about what it actually takes for you from maybe a Western culture or from a North American culture to be a winning communicator in an Asian environment. And we have a fantastic person to speak about that all the way over in London. We have David Clive Price. Hello, David.
Hi there, Eamonn. Great to be here.
Great, good. And just for people who don't know who David is, David, of course, you are a coach. You are an author of The Master Key to Asia, but you are also a specialist in cross-cultural communication. And that's what I'd like to talk about today. So for people who are maybe dealing with Asian business cultures for the first time, what do they need to know before they start?
Well, I think the number one thing, Eamonn, to know is that you're not dealing with one homogeneous region.
For sure.
Many, many different cultures. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that although we are living in a globalized world, in the era of 24/7 global communications, texting, social media, it would be easy to assume that the English language united the people of the world, and that's all that a Western business executive or speaker would need.
Oh, so are you going to tell me that John Cleese was wrong when he said, "Don't speak English, I'll just speak a little louder"?
Exactly the opposite. Yes, I've heard that one story turn into, for business, just speak a little louder and your Chinese counterpart will become a Western educated MBA. You see, so it's the same sort of attitude, and it's not going to work. And it's not going to work because although business is the lingua franca in Asia and in other parts of the world, a one-size-fits-all English presentation is very unlikely to succeed. We're dealing with high context cultures. So yes. I know it sounds very technical. What's a high context? Well, it really means that you're reading the context of the person. For example, what they radiate in terms of trust, or trustworthiness, or loyalty, or authenticity, etc. You're reading these contexts and a long-term commitment, long-term relationship, possibility for long-term relationships. These are all included in the context of how an Asian might view you, rather than what we normally assume is low context. We're going to go straight to the point. There are three things that we're going to discuss, and that we're going to be leading in the direction of a contract at some point, hopefully in the near future, and I can get back on my plane and go back to my home country rather soon, and we've wrapped everything up.
Wonderfully transactional.
Rational and transactional. However, Asia isn't quite made like that.
Yeah.
Work like that. The cultural context, in other words, is all.
Yeah. Well, actually, let's kind of tease that out a little bit, because for many Westerners, the notion of trying to get their heads around the cultural norms and values that are really quite different. Let's say if you're looking at something like a Chinese community versus, say, a Japanese, what are the major things that they ought to understand? So when we're talking about context, how does that translate into values and norms?
Well, the Japanese, for example, are very much more consensus-driven than we are. They are hierarchical in the sense that the boss leads. However, unlike with us, the boss gets the whole consensus of every department within the company and gathers it all together before a meeting. So the outcome of the meeting is probably already decided beforehand, through this process of what the Japanese called nemawashi, washing around the roots.
Yes, I like that. That's a lovely turn of phrase. And actually, funnily enough, it's not that dissimilar, curiously, from academic circles, where you'll often have what we call the nodding heads.
Right.
where people are listening to you, but actually the decision has already been made.
Yes. So this translates into different necessities for speakers to and business people to make their point, and their point is not going to be made that directly as they would expect. For example, a US type of speaker that bounds onto the stage in Asia and does, "Here I am, great to see you all," is not necessarily going to succeed in either China or Japan or Korea or in any of the other Asian countries, perhaps with the exceptions of Hong Kong or Singapore. But even there, it would seem rather too much pushing yourself out in front. So there are all these little norms to take into consideration.
Yes.
But most of all, I think, if you're speaking or giving a presentation in a cultural context out there, you have to win your audience, but win it in a way that's even more relational than you have to research your audience. You have to know where they're coming from, how you can chime with them, and that means doing some cultural homework. You have to know the background of this country that you're in. A one-size-fits-all presentation is not going to work. I was the speechwriter for HSBC at the time of the handover of Hong Kong to China, and I knew very well that every speech that I made was not a template because it was going to be given in Seoul or Tokyo or in Manila or in Bangkok, and each one had to be different, had to have a flavor of the local culture, had to be geared to that context.
And that's an interesting thing, because I suppose, and actually maybe we can learn a little bit. So obviously you had to go through quite a learning curve. And I'm sure sometimes it felt a bit steep. But in terms of the most important things that you learned earlier on, you know, if you're looking at core things that you had to change in the way that you approached communication, what would you say was at the heart and center of that?
Remember that English is only the second language of almost all Asian countries apart from Australia and New Zealand. Therefore, you have to craft your work and the way that you speak more simply, more straightforwardly, and to speak as I am now, a little more slowly, and gathering in cultural, little cultural asides, cultural viewpoints.
Yes.
Have a few words in the local language.
Yes, that's terribly important, because one of the things that I learned from years and years, you may know this, that I created, I don't know how many hundred advertisements in so many different languages. But one of the things you need to learn very early on is that everything you do has to be from your audience's frame of reference.
Yeah.
And particularly when, and I'll get you maybe to chat about this, particularly when you're dealing with Asian audiences, the type of interactions that you have will be quite different to what people might experience in America, for example.
Yeah.
Maybe you could speak to that and how you found you could engage more effectively with an audience that was looking at you beyond the words that you were speaking.
I probably direct your presentation or speech more towards the sense of the group, of what it means for the collective, of what it means for the team. Teamwork is hugely important. And the family. Include something of the family. Include something of a family festivity like Chinese New Year. Anything that refers to the group and the team is far more successful in Asian cultures than going straight for the bottom line. You know, this is going to make us a lot of money. End of story. Or that you know, the next thing is to drive up profitability or return on investment, etc., etc. Your results. And that means individual results when we talk about it often. But for Asians to talk very much about the team, and if you talk about the society, a little bit of maybe the national mission, because we forget that many Asian countries are very young in their democracies or in their forms of government, They have their own national missions. You know, you can plug into those, and apart from anything else, just have a couple of words, very simple, like "Ohayo gozaimasu," good morning, or "Konnichiwa," or "Ni hao," how are you? Or anything that shows that you know where you are. You're not in an airport, and that you're connecting with the people on the level that they want to be connected with, which is relational. Relationships matter so much, and team and group and family matter so much.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think perhaps that's one of the most important elements. And this has to do with, I suppose, that you're thinking beyond the conversation that you might be sparking about longer term relationships and cultivating a communication that gets to the whole person, not just to the task at hand.
Yes, very spot on, Eamonn. That is precisely the feeling of what you should be presenting, and the stories that you're telling, because it's all part of a story, isn't it? Asians are great storytellers. I think we forget this, that we you know, the Irish are great storytellers.
Yes.
But the Asians are equally great storytellers, and they will love it, a presentation which brings in your stories and has a very clear beginning, middle, and end and theme. They love that, especially if it can be related to their own culture.
Yes, because it's more apocryphal, absolutely that. And tell me, though, in terms of the types of lessons that you've learned, if we can kind of delve a little bit into that, what would you say were the hardest lessons that you had to pick up, things that you maybe railed against at the outset?
I probably had to pick up not to be too humorous at the start of things. Certainly not to tell jokes in the way that we might start a presentation with a joke, which would definitely fall flat.
Yes, can I tell you that I discourage executives
from doing it anyway.
From telling jokes and move towards stories. Yes, yeah. So good.
Absolutely. So that fits in any case with both West and East. But I think what I found most was that the people in Seoul don't want to be told how business is done in London or New York or Washington or wherever. They want to feel part of the story themselves. And therefore, as I say, if you can bring in some local context, even a simple story about someone that you met in the street, or a wonderful temple that you went to, or a delicious meal that you had. Delicious meals, by the way, food is absolutely essential for
yes, I remember all too well. Yes,
absolutely. I say, if you want to succeed in Asian business, talk about food.
Yeah,
that's an absolute fail-safe.
Yeah. Now, one other thing I wanted to pick up on, and really, of course, we could talk all night about this, is one of my very favorite topics. In your book, you mentioned something I think very interesting that maybe people wouldn't think about as much. You talked about the power and the importance of appearances.
Yes.
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes. If you go to any Asian capital nowadays, you'll find that they're all on a roll of affluence, and their populations are young. Almost 70%, I think, of the population of Asia, of the different Asian countries now, are under 25. So you have incredibly young, youthful, dynamic cultures, much in love with style, with fashion, with sophistication, culture, movie stars, cars, every form of fashionableness, really, you'll see on the streets of Seoul or Bangkok or Manila or Tokyo or Vietnam in Hanoi. So you have to bring your own presentation up to those levels. Generally speaking, Asians will not expect you to walk around in open neck shirt, even in tropical countries, for a business meeting. They won't expect you to go to a conference in slacks or open-toed sandals or chinos or any of those things, right? They won't expect you to slouch around. They want you to be smartened up, and they want you, because stylishness to them represents authenticity, which
Yes.
seems odd to us, but in fact, that means that you've taken care about yourself and the way you think about yourself. And that means that you're somebody, you know, that can make a good partner in business, and that most of all, they can be seen with you, and they love to be seen with a stylish looking foreigner or Westerner. So, you know, drop the old watch and get a real good one on your wrist, and, you know, go to the gym, get moisturized, etc. Have your hair properly cut, and wear a jacket even in midday at a meeting, because in the tropical countries even, and in the non-tropical countries, you'll be expected to look smart and in a darkish suit, or for the ladies, a smart dress without showing too much skin, but with nice accessories, beautiful accessories. Again, this love of the aesthetic, which we get in Japan, Korea, China, is very much to the fore.
Well, this has been wonderful advice. And before I let you go, maybe I'll just ask you a rounding out question. If you were thinking about somebody who is making their first foray into speaking in different Asian cultures, what is the one single bit of advice that you now know that you wish you had known a long, long time ago, that you would say before you set off, here's something, if you remember nothing else, this is what I want you to know?
Project an image of calm. Don't be too jumping around the stage. Remain poised. Speak slowly and effectively, and enjoy it above all. But, and add that little phrase, that ni hao or good morning, konnichiwa, whatever it is, to the beginning. In fact, I've seen recently a speaker in Asia put up, a Western speaker put up good morning in the local language on the screen before he arrives. And then that's a nice warm thing to put there. So I would recommend that as a great start as well.
Well, it's been wonderful. And I knew that we'd have a hugely interesting conversation, David. So I appreciate you taking the time this evening.
My pleasure, Eamonn. And it's great, as always, to talk with you.
Well, good, wonderful, good. Well, and can I thank you, the watchers and the listeners this evening. You have been watching the Reluctant Speakers Club Expert Series. And until the next time, happy speaking.